Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Israeli singer-songwriter Hanan Ben Ari released a new song about the pandemic this week. It's called Ga'aguim Livnei Adam, Longing for Human Beings. He sings, "We figured we'd conquered it all. Towers in the heavens we built. Man who needs man. No other flood will come in our day. Until you came and infected and crazed and quarantined and confused and shocked." Maybe you had a chance to watch the YouTube video we sent out Thursday. The haunting yet all too familiar images now of empty playgrounds, streets without cars, schools without children. Against the backdrop of these societal deficits, Ben Ari reminds us of what we've lost. We are living in a time of longing. We yearn for all those things we've lost, all the simple pleasures. A baseball game in the midst of a roaring crowd. Dinner at a favorite restaurant. Sitting outside on a warm spring night. Sipping a glass of wine and chatting with a loved one or family or friends amid the din of chattering patrons at tables within arm's reach. We yearn for a trip to the library or a movie or the supermarket without fear. And yes, this week we long for a big, raucous Seder with all the trimmings, people packing themselves into familial homes, warm embraces, singing, telling jokes, and the stories of our ancestors, food and food and food again. For all this and so much more that we cannot have right now, we yearn. There's a wonderful Hebrew word that's a bit difficult to translate. The word is halavei. It means something like if only. It's a word of longing for something better, something brighter. But the second part of the word lavai really means after, which is to say halavai is about what comes after now, and maybe also after before. Ask yourself, did our longing begin with COVID-19? Did we have, before this whole situation, all that we craved, all that we needed? Think carefully about the world before the novel coronavirus. What did we yearn for? Connection, compassion, conviction. There were prayers that we didn't even know to pray because we didn't have to, for restaurants and baseball and farmers markets and vacations. But weren't there other prayers too? What have become of the prayers we prayed that went unanswered? The suffering then that went unnoticed? The injustices that kept piling up around us? Our Parsha deals with sacrifice, which is the biblical antecedent to prayer. It's not that prayers are a post-temple phenomenon. Jews always prayed, of course, but the methodology of prayer differed. The rituals of the Mishkan, later Beit HaMikdash, were more kinesthetic, even performative, and quite literally a more visceral experience. So you might be surprised to learn that among the priestly responsibilities was something that seems at first glance fairly mundane. V'lavash hakohen mido vad, u'michnasei vad yilbash al bisaro. The priest shall dress in linen raiment, with linen breeches next to his body. Vehirim et hadeshen, asher tochal ha'esh et ha'olah al hamizbeach, and he shall take up the ashes to which the fire has reduced the burnt offering on the altar, vesamo etzel hamizbeach, and place them beside the altar. Now, anyone who pays attention knows that custodial work is holy work, but Hasidic thinker Reb Simcha Bunim of Pshischa says it's not the Kedusha that makes this act of sweeping the ashes away important, it's the mundanity. Each morning, he says, the Kohen puts on ordinary clothes and does this menial labor to ensure that he never forgets his link to the ordinary people who spend their days in mundane pursuits. Now, we would do well, I think, to consider those who continue to work in essential services. I'm not talking about the gun shops. No, the doctors and the nurses, yes, but also technicians, the custodians who scour surfaces of the virus, the postal workers and Amazon delivery drivers, the food manufacturers, and those who sweep the countless floors around the world so that commerce, such as it is, can continue. But another Hasidic master, the Beit Yaakov, son of the original Ishbitzer Rebbe, who led the community of Radzin, says the sacrifices and the ashes too are all about prayer. People bring sacrifices because they have some capacity to recognize that they are not properly aligned with God's consciousness. The smoke, then, which rises to heaven, symbolizes accepted prayers. Yet, says the Beit Yaakov, there are human capacities that, when clarified and rectified, nevertheless fall from that supernal connection. This is the source of the ashes, that which the fire refused to accept. What does this mean? That some prayers, many prayers, are not accepted, and they pile up like ashes on the floor after the blaze has consumed the offering. And you might think these ashes, these rejected prayers don't matter. That even though the one who brings the sacrifice pours her heart and soul into that offering, in the end there's only refuse where once there was blood and fire. But the Beit Yaakov explains this is hardly the case. Seeing that part of one's sacrifice is not accepted leads to that cry of prayer, why has this intention, this inner transformation, not been accepted as well? It is in response, he says, that God, out of great compassion, commanded that the ashes be deposited next to the altar. They are absorbed in their place and they form the body of the altar. That's right. The rejected prayers, the ones that come from our deepest desire, that are worthy of acceptance but whose time has not yet come, are assimilated into the very altar itself. As my colleague Rabbi Rona Shapiro writes, we build lives, our commitments, our future offerings on the altar built of our past failures. Halavei. What did we long for before? Halavei. What do we need that a return to baseline will not grant us? Halavei. How should we be now so that we can be better then? Beth Ammer shared a beautiful Pablo Neruda poem recently, which I think speaks to this moment of convulsion and pain, but also promise and yearning. The poet seems to ask, is there something in the pause, in the unobtrusive sweeping of floors that might constitute an altar for future longing, future prayer, future betterment? It's called keeping quiet. Now, we will all count to 12, and we will all keep still. This one time upon the earth, let's not speak any language. Let's stop for 1 second and not move our arms so much. It would be a delicious moment without hurry, without locomotives. All of us would be together in a sudden uneasiness. The fishermen in the cold sea would do no harm to the whales, and the peasant gathering salt would look at his torn hands. Those who prepare green wars, wars of gas, wars of fire, victories without survivors, would put on clean clothing and would walk alongside their brothers in the shade without doing a thing. What I want shouldn't be confused with final inactivity. Life alone is what matters. I want nothing to do with death. If we weren't unanimous about keeping our lives so much in motion, if we could perhaps do nothing for once, perhaps a great silence would interrupt the sadness, this never understanding ourselves and threatening ourselves with death. Perhaps the earth is teaching us when everything seems to be dead and everything is alive. Now, I will count to 12, and you keep quiet, I'll go. How should we be now so that we can be better then? How do we approach in this moment of quiet the altar of our past failure? I want my friends to invite us, each of us, to think deeply about this question. It may feel like now in the darkness we can hardly think of the future. And I don't mean to be dismissive of the confusion and anxiety and even the loss, the grief that so many of us are feeling. That's real and it's reasonable. There is what to be afraid of for ourselves and for our loved ones and for all that we as a nation and a global community have lost. There is much to grieve. But one day this will end. And we'll return to restaurants and ball games and movies, the many distractions of our frenetic lives. Perhaps now, before all of that, is precisely the moment to think of prayers we pray and lives we wish to build. Rabbi Yochanan, in one of my favorite midrashim, points out that there are two parts of the human eye, the light and the dark. But we don't see through the light. We see only through the dark part. Darkness, stillness, quietude can be clarifying. So Chevra, take a moment wherever you are. Maybe close your eyes if you like. See if you can picture those ashes in your mind, the prayers you used to pray or used to wish to pray if only you could find the time. Let's each choose two things. Just two for now. A yearning for yourself and a yearning for those beyond you. Now, picture those two things. The thing you must do to be a better you, and the thing you must do to foster a better community, society, maybe a better world. Ask yourself, what can you do now to ensure these prayers are accepted in heaven? How can your offering become smoke that rises and not ash that falls? Or if it is to fall, how can you ensure that it will become assimilated into the Mizbeach, the altar itself, so that you can offer it up again and again and again until that prayer, that wish for a better you or a better tomorrow comes true? How will you be now so that we can all be better then? This is very much the prayer of Hanan ben Ari, the Israeli singer who released Longing for Human Beings this week. Loneliness, isolation is nothing new, he points out. We, the human race, have been headed in that direction, well, for quite some time. On this eve of Pesach, he seems to ask, can a plague, a curse even, also hold the possibility of blessing? Halavei, can the after be better, not just than the now, but also the before? How you brought back sanity, he sings, longing for human beings. The loneliness suddenly burns, we nearly lost ourselves, almost stopped feeling. And then he makes a request, essentially the same one I make of us today. Od me'at ze hakol yigamer, va'ani mevakesh im efshar, she'baboker achrei shetalchi, Lo niyeh shuv oto hadavar. Soon all of this will be over, and I request, if possible, that the morning after you leave, we won't go back to being the same. Halavei. Abby's going to join me. I'm going to take a sip of water. And then we're going to sing this beautiful song, Gagoim Livnei Adam, in the Hebrew. Again, you should have received this in a link in the email that went out this week. If you want to follow along, sing along. And even if you don't have the words in front of you, you can just listen to them now and read the translation or watch the YouTube video later. כבר חשבנו ניצחנו הכל, מגדלים בשמיים בנינו, בן אדם, מי צריך בן אדם, לא יבוא עוד מבול בימינו.
לעולם, לעולם לא ניפול, תעזוב נסתדר בעצמנו, חכמים, נכונים וצודקים, וכלום לא נמצא מעלינו.
עד שבאת והדבקת ושיגעת והזכרת ובלבלת והבהלת מיד. איך החסרת את השפיות, געגועים לבני אדם,
פתאום שורפת הבדידות, כבר לא טסים מפה לשם.
כל הפארקים נעולים,
חתונות כמעט בלי איש,
כמעט איבדנו את עצמנו, כמעט הפסקנו להרגיש. עוד מעט זה הכל ייגמר, ואני מבקש אם אפשר
שבבוקר אחרי שתלכי
לא נהיה שוב אותו הדבר. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.